All right, good evening, everybody. It's Monday, January 12th at 6:03 p.m. So I'm going to call tonight's meeting of the Housing Committee to order. First order of business is approval of the minutes of our last meeting. I forget the date, though I have read the minutes and they look good to me.
The date was,
Good.
never mind. Wait, December 8th.
December 8th.
Very, very comprehensive.
Yeah. Any corrections, additions, modifications? And if not, somebody might be so kind as to move to approve the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All right. We will do our usual roll call vote because we're remote. In my list of names, Fred Orlowski.
Yes.
Jerry.
Yes.
Montserrat.
Yes.
Paula.
Yes.
Fred Barron.
Don't get to vote.
Don't get to vote. I know you're really missing out. And I vote yes, so it is, the minutes are unanimously approved of December 8th. Okay. The next item I threw on because discuss the Housing Committee budget for FY 2027. So I noted, I got a message from the town administrator about that we never submitted any budget request. Seems like by default, I don't know who did it, certainly wasn't me, that the 2026 budget that ends June 30th set aside $500 for the Housing Committee. I don't know.
I think that was because that's what it had been for years before that.
Yeah.
And they just carried it over.
And I don't know. Does anyone have any? I don't know that we really have any costs. I can certainly throw in a budget.
I was thinking about this, and we might. If we want to do any work on the DeMeo property, like hire someone to do, survey or something like that, we might want some money to cover that. I saw Jerry nodding to that.
Yep.
I agree. And I think it might be worthwhile to put in, for $1,000 or even $1,500, knowing that it'll have to be defended, and but to have a budget that we can use to do that kind of, very preliminary consultancy or surveying or whatever.
Right. We can talk about that in a minute, but that's probably on the low side.
Yes.
Okay. I was just picking a figure at random. But you can go ahead. But I think we should prepare for that by having a budget request rather than just going along and the past number.
Okay.
I think in the past we used some money I can remember for postage when we did a postcard mailing for some housing funding activity. I think around COVID time or something, we had a mailing, and it was, I'm guessing, $300 or $400 for postage to mail a postcard to every citizen or property owner in town. So that's what we used some of it for in the past. And I don't know if we want to do any kind of mailing this year or next year.
All right.
Did we expend anything this year?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jerry.
Did we expend anything this year?
As far as I know, nothing. I looked at the most recent town summary report and saw just that was set aside, but there were no expenses against it.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Please.
So, who was it who said this to you? Was it Peter?
Well, those of us who are board chairs have received various, emails regarding future appearances before the Finance Committee, which Jerry can attest to defend various budgets. And I noted in an email that among other committees, housing was listed with a note from that basically said, no budget sheet has been submitted, which makes
Okay.
sense because none of us would have done that. And I
Right.
certainly did
And
not.
so, and are they asking us to submit one now? And is it the right time, or are we submitting something late?
Well, Jerry, what do you think?
It's,
Jerry, you're a chair, right? Or like you're a kahuna on the finance committee.
I am interim chair until next week's reorganization. We'll see where that goes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're having our first meeting next week, and then the reviews will begin in earnest a couple weeks later. So I would imagine the Dunning notices are a way to try to get ahead of all the paperwork that needs to be compiled, because the budgets come to us in a very thick binder with every department's budget and every department's backup. And so the idea of having a Dunning notice, I think the concept of, hey, if you didn't submit and you don't see a great need, then we'll just use last year's is probably, fine. But Mr. Barron's point, we should talk a little bit about 268 State Road. I'm not sure that needs to be in this budget, or there may be some other options.
Yeah.
But that definitely comes to mind to me. You might need a little something for something in there,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
even if
we
it's a
should,
placeholder.
given that these budget meetings are coming up in soon and
Yes.
probably before our next regular meeting of the housing committee, we should make a decision tonight on a number. And
Yeah, the
I'm
first
happy
meetings
to-
start on February 4th,
yeah,
but I don't have the list yet.
But the other thing that would come up that we could use this money for, and I have on other committees, is if any of us of the committee, housing committee, wanted to attend a seminar or a meeting or workshop, say in Worcester or Boston, or statewide, anywhere, our expenses for attending that would be covered under this item, which would include, if there's a registration fee, also mileage, if you have to travel to Boston, 100 something miles either way. That would be eligible expense to use against this dollar amount we have in our budget.
yeah,
I think that's what
leave some
why
dollar
there's $500 there,
in
Yeah.
there.
on a regular basis. I think what we're probably going to be talking about is whether we need to up that number
yeah,
for contingencies on 268 State Road.
yeah. Okay. Well, tell you what, why don't we table this for the moment? We'll come back to it. So let's talk about the DeMayo property, where we are, and what we might do in FY 2027. And again, we're talking about the budget year starting July 1st. And what we have through June 30th is $500. That was put in our budget. So if there are expenses that we have for mailings or seminars or trainings or what have you, we do have some money allocated to us by, forces unknown. All right, so I'll turn it over to Jerry. I have basically, from shortly after our last meeting, been diverted into sort of a family emergency that has given me no time to follow up on anything for any board or committee, and I just returned home earlier today. So over to you, Jerry.
Great. So I have 3 meetings to try to bring up. I'll try to be as brief as I can. One with the Board of Health, one with the Chief Field Engineer for Berkshire Design Group, focusing on septic issue, and one with Gina over at the Franklin County Regional Housing Authority, also representing RDI. So I've had conversations with all 3, and I'll try to be brief, but be happy to answer questions as best I can.
Can you repeat what was the last meeting again?
Sure. The last meeting was with the Board of Health Director, and I'm looking for her last name, Gina. Bear with me, Montserrat.
I thought Gina was with the Franklin Regional Housing Authority and RDI.
She is, but I just Giovanni, I believe it is. Hang on.
That sounds right.
Govoni. Okay.
From where?
So she's with the Franklin County Regional Housing Authority out of
Okay.
Greenfield, but also they are connected to, interlaced with the development company RDI.
Which stands for Rural Development, Inc.
Right. Which builds affordable housing. They've done about 100 apartments, 100 units to date since 1990. So anyway, let me go back to the Board of Health because I think I need to sort of build it from there. I had sent around an email from Fran over at the Board of Health saying, hey, your system that you picked isn't on this official mass, call it DEP, listing of alternative treatment plants. I then came into a conversation with Sydney and a gentleman named Glenn Ayers, who's pretty drilled down on where we need to go, and basically had the following to say, cutting to the chase. It will be very unlikely, even if that system were to be approved, and it was from the short list, that you would ever be able to discharge clear water into a brook that's inside of a conservation area. He said, if it's 100% rainwater coming down, nobody cares. But the environmentalist will be over your case. It will take years of public input and approval if there's no current discharge into the stream. Not a good way to go. You need to look at alternatives. Alternatives meaning below the ground. And we talked a lot about that. There are a number of systems which disperse, just like the septic system at your houses, below the ground that perk and are buried and work through a hydraulic process. He said the most important thing to do and to consider starting with is how much capacity, and this made all the sense in the world to me, how much capacity does this site have to support the treatment of water waste? While a restaurant generates quite a bit, it doesn't translate necessarily to apartments. The town health department has a limit of 110 gallons per bedroom per day. So if you build 2 bedrooms but it has 1 bathroom, your limit, you can't exceed 210 gallons per day. If you don't know how fast your soil can perk and how much it can hold, then you need to figure that out to back into, can this site sustain 10 units, 12, 24, 30, 50 units? We talked about a number of issues relative to the 2-bedroom versus 1-bedrooms. I don't believe any developer is going to come in and want to build all 2 bedrooms. He said that's not a problem with the Board of Health. If you want to build 1-bedrooms, we're happy to give a variance on that. He said there is the alternate technology list, which has a series of vendors that provide these wastewater treatment plants at different loads. But before you come in front of us, we're going to want to see a sign off from a physical engineer, a PE, which is basically a civil sanitary engineer, to tell us this is what's happening with the property. And that makes sense. We went down, they don't want to provide a specific list, but they went down a list of 4 or 5 people. I recognized one of the players, a company called Berkshire Design Group.
Yeah.
They're doing work over at my mother-in-law's condo over at Sugarloaf, but they've actually done a lot of work even here in town. They did apparently a lot of the study on town land around the I-91 exit and some other areas. So anyway, I had 2 calls with I then went on to have 2 calls with Berkshire Design Group after I spent an hour with the Board of Health. Talked with an initial guy that I had contact with from the South Deerfield project, the condo project, and then connected with their principal PE, physical engineer, a fellow named Chris Chamberlain.
Oh, yeah, I know Chris.
You know Chris,
Berkshire
great.
Design has come before the planning board many times on many different projects across town. They
Which he had mentioned.
have always been really professional and on top of things.
Yeah, so he seems pretty squared away. He went through the VHB feasibility analysis and also the material I sent him on Aquatech. He agrees you're never going to put water in that stream. Take that off the table. He said the VHB feasibility study was more focused on, quote, what's possible versus what really makes sense. And he said, what you really have to do, which the Board of Health had also said, is figure out what you can actually do with the property. And that would fall on probably 3 different areas. One, an area of soil exploration to determine what kind of soil do you have here, because a lot of this was not inside of the VHB feasibility study. Is it sandy? Is it silty? Is it sandy everywhere, silty everywhere, etc.? 2, a perk test, multiple perk tests within the footprint of what would be considered to be the buildable area. And the 3rd is examination of the floodplain elevations. He said the VHB study did not really look at floodplain. The most recent floodplains were just released. He did look at it and said it does not appear. He said you're close to what FEMA might call a floodplain, but not necessarily there, but you should confirm that before you go too far down the road. He said that's very easy to do with some GPS and some lasers. They can know exactly how things lay out. So it's more about, first step would be doing perk tests to inform what the design possibly could be. That will tell us how many gallons per day the site can absorb by looking at basically the number of gallons per square foot per day that the site itself can do. He said relative to groundwater, you have to build a mound 4 feet above where groundwater is. Alternate systems, he said, can reduce obviously the footprint of your leach field, and they're great because if you get the drip irrigation that I was describing earlier in my conversation with the Board of Health, you can move that around trees, you can move it around buildings. It doesn't have to be a straight field. If it's a straight field, you can't build on top of it, meaning you can't landscape. You can't put up trees, you can't stick a pagoda, whatever the case may be. You also need to account, and this was brought up by the Board of Health, for stormwater discharge coming off your new building. You're putting on a roof of a building, maybe outside parking, maybe not, but whatever the case, you're going to move stormwater around, and that needs to be considered as well and would need to pass the Conservation Commission, as Montserrat, I think you had mentioned before. Whether or not you have to go into a different discharge, what they call compensatory storage, is a question. It all depends on the measurements and the feedback of the study. So net, he sees it structured as follows. If there be a proposal that he could put together with a variety of phases, levels. First, to define, he said, importantly, you need to test for traditional septic to see what works as traditional septic, so that if you go the route of alternate, and alternate for some reason fails down the road, the health department will have, because they'll be part of that perk test and part of the record, the health department can at least say, hey, it's the fallback, it's bulletproof because we approve it for septic routine, and now we approve it for the other, potentially with conditions of annual maintenance, yada, yada, yada. So that's sort of phase 1, floodplain review, septic test. Phase 2 would be basically getting into let's call it the drawing elements and supporting charts to say what size systems can you put in. If you want to have a 30-unit building, do you need 2 or 3 alternate systems? What would that look like placed around the site, etc.? Because this company has landscaping, civil, and surveying all within the same wheelhouse, it's very easy for them to ramp up. And as I pointed out to him, there would come a point at which the town is not interested in designing the skin of the building. The town, I believe, is interested in understanding what can it physically do, clear the pathway for a developer to come in and begin saying, I'm interested in this, and understanding everything from floor plan restrictions to conservation to how the housing authorities might look at it. And all that's been sort of runway cleared for them. He said would be extremely beneficial, as would having the basic study so they don't have to go out and do it. Cost of that, he said, it's not $1,000. He said, but it's not multiple thousands above 10. So it's between 1 and 10 if he had to shoot off the top of his head. I told him I would talk.
Jerry, are you talking about the second phase of planning?
No,
After
the first,
perk and
the
flip?
first phase,
The
to
first
go
one.
in, do the perk test, coordinate with the Board of Health to sign off on it, do the elevation test relative to your floodplain, etc. Understand how the site completely works, also including appropriately updated conservation designations, because he said, hey, you're just like the Conservation Commission told me, or told, I think, Montserrat, those maps are not accurate. They
Right.
say your maps are not accurate. So that has to be refined. So one, it's not going to be a one. It's probably, I would imagine, a $500 to $7,500 expense. So
I
the question
think
there would
the
be,
town- there's a limit on using consultants to do studies. If it's it's either 10,000 or 30,000, you can contract with a consultant by invitation. You don't need to advertise for everybody in the whole state to submit bids. So if we have 2 or 3 that would be interested, if they're under 10,000, I think this committee could pick one of them.
that's great, Fred. That's great to know. The question would be source of the funding.
Right.
If it's 5 or 7,500, or he did not think it would be 10 grand to do this initial work. But it would seem to me money prudently spent that could say, yes, it can support 30 units of housing, or nope, it can support 12. And maybe you guys ought to think about doing something else relative to the real estate.
We, given that it might be as much as 10, we might want to consider, and it's late, but probably still doable, putting a capital request for that rather than out of the operating budget. Let the capital committee work on that rather than the finance committee directly.
Yep.
And I would say it could be for, a request for 10,000 on the understanding that it likely won't be 10,000. That's done all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Jerry, as the Board of Health said that they have records on the septic system that's on that property.
He did not say
Have
that.
they
They must have had something at some point in time
Right,
for the restaurant to approve the septic,
right.
but I don't have any direct knowledge of that, Fred.
Well, they
The-
supposedly have records of every septic system in town on property, unless it was built in 1800s, but I don't know what time period they started the Board of Health to manage that, monitor that, but I mean, I have it on my property, the original, and then the one that was redone in 87. There was records of maps of what was there, what was constructed by a certified contractor, I guess, and approved by Board of Health. So I would imagine the Board of Health has some record of that, or maybe some town agency, or even the building department.
Yep.
would a building inspector would have some record of what was built there before. Or there, which is still there today, I would guess, because I don't think any of that has been removed.
I don't think it's been removed, but there's a good chance that whatever's underground is collapsed.
Well,
It
you
I
wouldn't,
know,
mean,
it
the
wouldn't meet
property
any regs, of course.
has been unoccupied for 20 years
Yeah.
since the fire.
well, it
And
depends
we don't know how long
where it
before
was.
that the septic would have been built. We can find out.
Septic tanks last more than 20 years, so I wouldn't say that that's to ignore that
Well,
part.
yes, but that's assuming that the septic tank was put in right before the fire, not that it was put in
Well,
10, 20 years
I don't
before
know.
that.
We're making a lot of assumptions, and I think somewhere in town, there's should be some record of that. in the
I'll
building
check.
building.
Yeah.
I will check back with Glen Eyre on that to see at least what were the conditions identified when the septic was put in, which may give Berkshire Design Group a leg up on this and might help to minimize some of the cost. But I don't know that well, he said that perk tests are basically permanent unless there's been a serious modification to the area, the lot in question. And so that's why it was really good to figure out the baseline of a septic system versus an alternative system. Because
Right.
once they approve the baseline and then approve the alternative, then you always have the baseline to go back. So it's an interesting point. I will call and follow up
Yeah.
on that point.
I would conjecture that if plans for a pre-existing septic system could be uncovered, that would be useful, not necessarily because it would provide data on perk that's relevant today, but I would imagine, since we're not dealing with undeveloped land, if I were a developer, I'd like to know, like what infrastructure that is buried that I may have to, dig up and replace or avoid.
Yeah, no, the septic system clearly has to get yanked out. The question would be, I think, if you think of it as a rectangle, the septic system is at the back of that rectangle. That's where it's all located.
Mhm.
But we might have a need to understand parking in front of where that septic system is and on both sides, because that's where you may put your alternative waste treatment. But that's also where VHB recommended on both sides of the center that the septic system go in. But it may start us off with something that Fredo has pointed out, and I'll see what I can find out. Fred Barron, how does one originate a capital committee request for 10 grand for such a thing?
Let's see. I would say talk to Pete Kane. Request for capital projects has already gone out, but the committee hasn't met yet. And I assume that I'm on the committee, Brent's on that committee, would consider a late proposal. I'm sure there's a town form for submission and, for how much you want, for what purpose, with some sort of estimate. And, it can be a ballpark from Berkshire Design saying, not more than 10,000 or something like that.
Okay. I'll check with Peter tomorrow or the next day.
So what I'll do actually is I've already started composing an email to Pete with Jerry as CC. So I'll get that email out tonight. But basically, there is a form, a capital request form that various departments and so on so prepare and submit. And as Fred pointed out, there is a capital improvement planning committee. I'm on that committee along with Fred and a couple of people. And we basically prioritize. We don't approve or deny, we simply prioritize. And so I can provide maybe Jerry, you and I could collaborate on a submission once we have the form, and I could sort of help advise on, like, how does the capital improvement planning committee historically look at these things and prioritize them?
Right, and I ran across that with the finance committee last year as we did the budgets.
Yeah,
And basically, we took everything that was an immediate need and said, okay, that makes sense. And
yeah,
everything that wasn't an immediate need is like, we'll hold off on that.
right. That's right.
But this, I think this has some legs on it, at least to answer our question. Otherwise, you're going to be in stasis for a long time with
Yeah.
not going anywhere.
Pending, like, trying to find grant money that could support this.
So let me get to my third discussion point, which is my conversation with the head of the Franklin County Regional Housing Authority, Gina Giovanni.
Wait a
Also-
second. I think either I missed it or something dropped off here. You said that there were 3 phases of planning that you got from the Berkshire Design Group, and the first was perk test and floodplain mapping and conservation designations. And what are the second and third?
Boy, you are really tight, Montserrat. I got to tell you.
I can't have a 1 without a 2 and a 3.
So the second point was only the second phase is the check-in point. Once we give you all the information, you have a chance to review it, then we check in with you, see where you want to go from there. I skipped that in my overview because I didn't think it was as relevant, but you were absolutely right.
So check in with Berkshire Design Group, or check in
Correct.
between us and them. Okay.
Check in with Berkshire Design Group between the delivery of the phase 1 information. Phase 1 is compile information. Phase 2, check in to review information. Phase 3 is basically moving to the sizing of systems, coming up with some simple charts relative to what you can build, how you could build it, et cetera, et cetera. What they basically want to do is hybrid the VHP concept because it has some pieces of a puzzle and integrate it with their direct site knowledge and create a bigger piece. But that's where suddenly your $10,000 bill becomes 50,
Mm-hmm.
and then you come back with a beautiful VHB type thing you can hand out to people. And that's where I think the developer needs to step in and start spending money. I think we just need to understand what can we do, and then you'd hand all that off to a developer. I don't think the town needs to subsidize the design and total layouts. So,
Well,
No, and I
Yeah.
also think it's important to give the developer something so they're not, they feel that at least we've got an investment in this,
correct.
the physical real estate.
He
Yeah.
thought that would be Chris felt that would be extremely helpful to your point, Fred, that if you come forward and say, hey, here's what we have, and we can show, here's what can perk, here's how many units, here's what the town would like to see in terms of the buildings, then that is they can really a developer can put their hands around that. Versus just we got a 4-acre lot, half of which you can't build on, and it doesn't have septic, and what do you guys think? So I think we're doing we're moving it in the right direction.
I have a concern here or maybe a question, and I hate to be the ogre of all this. I think it's a good effort for this committee to pursue some kind of housing development, housing project there. But to back up a little, has the town ever approved what kind of use do we want on that piece of property? Because it's gonna come down to issuing a request for a proposal to get developers to respond to make proposals to use the property. Are we gonna say it's only gonna be for housing, which this committee is promoting and will work with? Or is the RFP gonna say it will be for any kind of development that a developer wants to put in there? Whether it's housing, it's retail, commercial, and who is gonna decide? Well, who is gonna decide on that? I don't know if it's this committee is gonna decide on that, or well, I guess the select board will have the final decision, but we also have this, economic development person that maybe should be involved in in these meetings and discussions. So when it comes down to getting proposals in, that person is familiar with it and can make presentations to the select board. I think someplace in here, we're moving on a housing project, and I'm not, which would be great, but is that the only thing this town is looking for? I don't know.
Well, it's the only thing we're looking for. So
Right.
It's- Yeah,
Right, but it has to go through the town or through the select board to get final approval. If we've
well,
done that, do we
ultimately,
know?
the land is owned by the town,
Right,
meaning citizens of the town would ultimately have to vote to approve a sale or transfer for that purpose. All we, I think, this committee is trying to do is make progress towards, having a reasonable proposal, either determining that you can't do anything reasonable in terms of housing on this property, and we just say, the town should just sell it or do
Well-
something else with it. But, right now this committee is trying to develop get as close to a proposal for building housing, not anything else,
right,
not, not a professional building, not, that is what we are trying to do. And until we determine that there's nothing useful that can be done, like if these evaluations say doesn't perk or something's wrong with it and we can't do any reasonable housing, then we might abandon this particular parcel of land and turn our attention elsewhere. That's at least my opinion of what we're trying to do. Jerry, does
Right.
that sound
I-
consistent?
My thought would be you need to understand what the land can handle in terms of septic absorption, whether it's commercial, if it's a restaurant, or it's housing. If you don't have the answer to that part of the test, then you don't have anything but land sitting there. And so it may be that it's only perking enough for light retail commercial. It may be it can perk enough to create housing, which would be very interesting to this committee and potentially to the town. And it may be it perks for industrial. But until we know the soil condition as the first step, regardless of what's going to be done with the real estate above the ground, it's hard to have that conversation. I hear your point, but I think it's in the best interest of the town to move forward and understand the perk capacity of the real estate in order to determine what potential uses there might be.
but when the other study that was done on housing there, what's a VHB study, they didn't look at any of this at all. And yet they
Nope.
came up with proposals that I guess the town accepted, I guess,
The town did not accept them.
Well-
I think that what happened with the VHB study is it was solicited, it was provided, and then it was basically given over to this committee to do something with. But by that time, this committee had fallen apart, and
Right.
there was nobody to champion doing anything with that property. And now we're reconstituted and we are trying to do something.
okay, well,
And also, at least it was my view that was, as Jerry pointed out, was, when showing it to Berkshire, sort of aspirational of what might be done with the property. It wasn't a plan of
Correct.
what will be done. Here are your alternatives for what you can do. It's simply maybe you could do these things.
Which
And
doesn't sound like the best use of funds relative to not knowing the answer that here's what you can do and then moving from there.
I believe that didn't cost the town nothing. It was either a grant or an academic study.
Well, that's
It,
good.
it, there was nothing, I don't remember ever allocating any funds for that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think it was a student thing.
Yeah,
Uh, And the other thing, Jerry, I mean, Brent, you mentioned a word that caught my attention, whether the town is gonna sell this property. I think that's, any kind of development that's gonna occur there, to me, has to be development that owns the property. Cause I've been told with town administrator, other people, the town is not gonna be a landlord to that property, regardless
That's right.
of what goes on that property.
Right.
So the RFP would be for the sale of the, or own, whatever you call it, sale of the property for a certain kind of development or
But
proposed development.
it could be managed just like our other property next to the post office.
Well, I don't think the town is in a position to do that. I've been
Yeah, you
told we're
don't-
not gonna be landlords to it. We're not, no, the one by the post office, the town has an agreement with Franklin County Housing Authority to manage that property. The town does not. We have
Right.
an agreement to do it, but they're responsible for managing it completely. The town doesn't get any money from that.
well, how it's managed, it becomes a legal issue. The property can be sold. There can be a land lease with the payment in lieu of taxes or something like that. There are ways to work that issue out. That likely it would be a sale,
Right.
but there could be other options.
Great. In the interest of my time, may I go on to the conversation with the Housing Authority?
Okay.
Yes, please.
Great. So as I mentioned, the Housing Authority is interlaced with RDI. They built 100 units to date since 1990. They're primarily focused on blighted homes over the last 5 or so years. But she was very excited about the concept of multifamily here. It turns out they are the developers behind Sanderson Place. She said that was a very much a joint effort with multiple architects who live in the zone to design the building. They went through a lot of comprehensive permit issues with the town. That's on 3.5 acres of buildable land, a total of 33 units.
Hmm.
She said for them, 30 units is really the sweet spot to have a developer engaged. She said they are able to sort of fly under the radar of the bigger Boston companies, including the one that I worked for, because companies like my company, they are in the 100 units and up category. But she has access to capital. She has access to resources that are beyond what we can do. She did mention, we talked about the lottery itself. I think there'd be an interest there in administering the lottery. You said typically it would probably be in the tens of people, not hundreds of people per unit for a lottery for local interest. Interestingly to me, she said only 30% of the units, excluding anything that's Section 8, can have a local preference. 70% of the product is anybody shows up and there you go. So we can't say out of the affordable units, if there's 10 of them, all 10 of them have to have a local preference unless they have Section 8 inside of it. Section 8 is a whole different level, but it's something that can be considered. She likes the idea of workforce housing. She said what you really need is a good market study, and it's very possible because of its proximity to Northampton, even somewhat to Amherst, from a commuting perspective, that you might be able to get some decent rents. There, she said that they actually have worked quite heavily with the Beacon Company over at the Mill District apartments over by Cowles Lumber. And 85% of those units are filled with what are called mobile vouchers, not project-based Section 8 where there are one month.
Sorry, I don't know why that clicked something.
Anyway,
What would the market study determine?
the market study would determine if you have apartments here, what could you get for rents relative to the market end of the rents? Is it a 2-bedroom for $2,000, or like over at the Mill building, the Mill District, they're getting $3,500 for the units. The affordable rents are going to be fixed based on area median income, but they're still pretty strong. And so a developer like RDI, once they understand how much they can build, if they can build 30 units, would then work to pencil in the right mix of units that make sense to them for the type of construction, the construction cost, and their long-term hold plan. So if we can get it to 30, she's totally in. If this thing can only perk at 15, then she's like, nah, I can't help you. However, back to the point of money, and not to say let's not put in that capital committee request, because I've not been able to chase this particular hunt yet. But she said under the Affordable Homes Act was passed a couple of years ago. There's a state agency called, and I don't know the total names behind the acronym, but D as in dog, CAM as in Mary, M as in Mary. But basically the Division of Capital Asset Management something. She didn't know what the other M was, but I have a name. And she said they help with what she called TA, technical assistance to towns interested in developing residential housing. And she thinks that they could help cover the cost of that whole perk test situation we're talking about. So I'll go down that route, but I think we should stay on the other as well, because this is information based on a seminar that she went to a year or two ago. Who knows if there's still funds available, etc. But I have a name, I have part of a state agency division that, and it would be great if there's a grant available to us and it could be provided on a timely basis. Maybe the grant could be one that would reimburse the capital fund once it came through. I don't know. So something to think about.
Jerry, tracking things like that down is exactly where we've got a community development administrator.
Yep.
That would be right up her alley.
Good. Is that somebody I can connect with?
Absolutely. Catherine Gorick, I believe is really. She just started a few weeks ago.
Caroline Gurick.
And
All
the
right.
two M's are the last one is maintenance,
Ah,
management and maintenance.
good job. Thank you, Montserrat.
I just Googled it.
All right. So it's legit.
Yeah, I've actually dealt with them because I work at Greenfield Community College, and they are involved with any renovations we do on a building used by the state.
Oh, great. Are you familiar with this Abby Vladek?
No,
Okay.
we haven't done any renovations in a while.
All right. Well, I'll reach out to Caroline Gurick at the town and also see what I can find relative to connecting to Abby. What fun.
And
At the same time,
when we interviewed Caroline, she seemed very enthusiastic about doing housing related work.
great. Thank you so much. I look forward to introducing myself. And so Gina's totally on board. So I think we've got a number of people between her and the Board of Health. Seems like they're in a pretty good spot once they get answers to the test. We know who can help us take the test. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
I also think that in putting in a capital request or also the additional annual funding, it will help publicize the committee and what we're trying to do with this. That, something's happening, and I think that, it'll be good to show to the town in general that there can be movement here.
Good.
Okay,
Excellent.
so then back to that budget. It doesn't seem like it would go over too well or be likely to get approved for our committee to go from an annual request on the order of $500 to an annual request on the order of $5,000 or $10,000. I mean, just look at the percentage budget increase year over year, and boy, that would, without a real clear plan for what we're going to spend those monies on. I think the capital improvement request could be shaped
And
in a
this and
focused
it's
way.
this is a one-shot thing, so should be a capital project
Yeah,
anyway. This is not should not be
yeah,
in the operating budget.
yeah.
Great.
So, I mean, unless we could brainstorm some, again, we've talked about postage, we've talked about training. I'm happy to throw in $1,000 or $1,500 as a budget for 2027, more or less to say we're much more active now. We're focused on this particular parcel of land. We feel like we might need to get some tests done that may not necessarily be capital improvement. I'd have to figure out how to
When I
explain
threw
it.
out the number, I was not aware of the cost of the test. I
Yeah,
thought might be lower.
yeah.
Right.
It should be a capital request. Therefore, there's really no need to have a bigger ask for the operating budget.
So stick with
I mean, that,
500.
Yeah, I
I
don't.
would think so.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the operating budget's going to get whacked by healthcare and potentially senior center. So, and then obviously whatever happens with the schools.
oh, the
Right.
budget's going to get whacked. I already know we're going to have a big hit with the schools.
Right. Exactly,
I've
Fred.
already gotten that information
Mm,
as preliminarily.
yeah. So,
But there's never a good year to ask for an increase in any case.
wow.
It's always something.
Yep. Agreed.
All right, so I'll take that as consensus. I don't know that we
Yeah.
need a vote. That I'll submit just another $500 for FY27, and we'll expect to do other things using, grants and capital requests. All right. So it is 6:55 p.m. Are there any other topics that nobody anticipated within the last 48 hours?
Can I give a quick update on the CPC plan edit?
You very well may. Please
Okay, so you
proceed.
might remember this has been kind of a long process. But Jerry is watching the results of the American Community Survey, and it turns out that they do one survey every year and another one every 5 years, and we feel like the 5-year survey would have information that would be more valuable to us, more useful in this context, and that comes out this month. And so we are going to do our editing after that comes out this month, and then we will bring it to you at the February meeting for you to approve before we submit it to the CPA. The CPC. And I proposed that plan to the CPC, and they were fine with it.
Excellent.
Okay. Thanks for that update.
But for that survey, for then the results of that, is there a cost to the town for that?
No, you just look it up online.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
It's basically a very large data bank, Fred, with a variety of filters that one could use. You could drive yourself crazy with statistics, but there are a number of preset parameters, which is where I assume the stats from the last update were drawn. So we'll hopefully be able to go find those, maybe put them in a different order to clarify a bit more. So I think we'll be okay. Unless somebody wants to massage the US government's 5-year history of data statistics on Franklin County by the end of February.
Okay.
All right. Well, another good meeting all. Unless there's anything else, perhaps somebody would consider moving to adjourn.
Next
I move
meeting,
that we
Just clarify
adjourn.
next
Yeah.
next meeting.
Well, we should always do that, shouldn't we? All right, looking at the calendar. So, um, so, we agreed that we would not meet on our regular schedule because I'll be out of the country on, so we agreed we would not meet on our regular schedule, which would have been Monday, February 9th. Instead, my calendar reflects that we agreed to an ad hoc meeting on Tuesday, February 17th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Did we?
I don't see that, but
Yeah,
I don't
wasn't
think I
here-
would have agreed to 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I wasn't here for the last meeting, so I don't know.
Okay,
okay.
so I could do a meeting on Tuesday, the 17th. I don't know, let me look at the town calendar to see what else is going on in February.
Actually, I'm showing a Tuesday, 17th meeting as,
Yeah, I have it down for Tuesday the 17th at 6 also.
yeah,
Yeah, interesting. Maybe I dropped it on my calendar 3 hours too early.
Does 6
Um,
p.m. work for you on the 17th?
It does, it
Okay.
does. It's not in the town calendar yet, but I see nothing else on the town calendar for February 17th.
Yeah, I think we also did March in the last meeting.
yeah, March 9th.
Yeah, and that one will also be the housing trust.
Okay.
All right,
But
so
I think this confusion is why we should clarify this at every meeting of when the next meeting.
yes,
Yeah, thanks for bringing
I-
it up, Fred.
yeah, I do have the Housing Committee and Housing Trust at 6 p.m. on Monday, March 9th.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. All right. So,
Okay, now I move that we adjourn.
Just
Oh.
one quick note
Okay.
for Jerry. If you're talking to anyone like Berkshire or someone else, or the RDI, the developer, we do have funds through CPC and through the Housing Trust that might be able to subsidize work in the world of housing.
Got it.
So if RDI says, we can't do under 30, well, if we can kick in 100,000, 150,000, can they take it down to the 24 max or whatever? Would that help?
Excellent.
Because
All right.
something like that is why that money is there.
Yeah.
As long as it's for affordable housing.
So we'd close the capital stack for them.
So let's just, I just advise going back to the agreement
Mhm.
with the CPC on the use of those funds, because there are restrictions.
Yep.
Maybe what Fred is describing fits within how we're allowed to use those funds, but I was a little unsure. That
I think it's more in terms of construction than
Yeah.
Planning and
Yeah.
because I don't know that it would work, that those funds would be available for perk tests, for instance.
Yeah.
Right.
But if we can work like I'm sure they did with Sanderson Place, work something between the town and the developer to be able to bring some funds to bear.
So that could be very attractive.
That's why I brought it up.
Yep. That plus the fact that you own this land.
Right.
So I think you had the combination of those two relative to the overall capital stack that the developer is going to look at and say, how am I going to pay for this once I know the costs?
Right. And as Brent said, we'll have to check to make sure that the money is spent within the parameters of CPC and Housing Trust
Yep.
guidelines, but we can probably, we may need to have a lawyer to do that, but we'll figure that out.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Right.
It sounds like there's been a lot of cooperation through many departments and even outside agencies.
That's how these things get done, is
Yep.
you get
Yeah.
cooperation across the board.
Good.
And I'll just still note that a 30-unit structure would not be approved within current Whately zoning, so that would need to be addressed probably through a friendly 40B.
Yeah, well,
But-
we've got, 40B is there.
Yeah.
It's a question of whether a 30-unit complex would pass muster with the community, how it would look and all
Right.
that. But that's down the road.
Yep.
Let's
Baby
figure out what we can
steps.
actually, what the project, the land can support for construction. I think that's the first step.
That is the absolute first thing, is what's the max that it can support.
Right. Okay. Good.
All right,
Thank you. Very
Montserrat,
helpful
you're up again.
conversation.
Okay, now I move that we adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Motion made and seconded.
Who
All
seconded?
in favor? That was Jerry.
Thank you.
Jerry's exhausted and needs to move on. Thank you for all your hard work on this, Jerry, in the last.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Jerry.
Yep. No, it's all a team effort. You guys
Yeah.
are good sounding boards. Thank you.
Well, So, okay, all in favor, you can just like raise your hand. I can just sort of see, and make, I think, and Fred doesn't vote. So we are adjourned at 7:04 PM until our next meeting in February. All right, good night, all.
Good
Good
night,
night.
all.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.